So I know that I am not the only one that hears elementary, middle, and high school students and adults belting out the ending of Defying Gravity because they just saw the movie Wicked. I mean, Wicked is huge right now, okay? But I also know that as a homeschool mom, we like to read. We like to read books to our kids and introduce books to our kids. Now, I'm not saying we should be reading Wicked, the Wizard of Oz reboots. Not at all. I'm talking about the original Frank L. Baum books that were written in the early 1900s with little Dorothy and Toto and all these characters that we remember from the movie. That's the book that I'm talking about. What could be so bad about a book that was written that early? Well, I'm here to tell you that there are a lot. Well, I'm going to list 5, but it's going to make sense when you watch this video that there's a deeper root to this, okay? So there are spoilers. I need to tell you guys there are spoilers. So if you haven't read the book and you're planning on reading it, don't watch this video, or you could just skip to the end. Check the timestamps down below so you can hear some of the allegories, because the allegories are pretty cool in this. I will give it that. That's probably the only thing I think is really cool about these books, okay? So I'm gonna confess, I busted out the Wizard of Oz books. I only read 2. I only read the first 2. I couldn't make it past that one. I don't know if I'm gonna read Ozma of Oz, I'm not sure, but I am gonna say that it was my mom's favorite book series, and I thought, heck, you know, why don't I share it with my kids? Thankfully, my kids are a lot older. Second oldest girl is 10. She was interested in it, but both of us had a long conversation about this. And then I have 13 and 15, and they were boys, and they were just like, yeah, no. So number 1, it's pretty morbid and gross sometimes. Not good for those early elementary school kids. I mean, there's heads coming off, arms getting cut off. I mean, okay, so the Tin Woodsman, like I said, spoiler. How did he become a Tin Woodsman? Well, you know, his axe got enchanted because he was in love with a Munchkin girl whose mom didn't want him to get married to her because she liked the girl to work for her. And so she was able to get a witch to enchant his axe. So when he went to cut down the tree, the axe turned on and cut off his arm. So then he went down to the shop and he got a new arm made out of tin. Then to cut off his other arm, same thing. Leg, boom. Then it cut right through his chest. So he got a midsection and a head, and then he's a Tin Woodsman. Doesn't make any sense at all, but it's so graphic and gross. And that's not the only thing that's gross in the book in regards to that. So just know that there are some images there that you may not want your child to hear about in this book. And it continues through the marvelous Land of Oz, which is the second book that is, you remember the movie, the Return to Oz movie that Disney came out with like back in, I think it was the 80s. I don't even know how we survived the 80s with this movie. It was so incredibly traumatizing. I didn't even want my kids to watch it. They're not going to watch that movie. Just not. It's like the creep. It beats out Never Ending Story, okay? And possibly Dark Crystal. Not quite sure about that though. Either way, the movie, no. Oh, so The Marvelous Land of Oz is it's loosely based off of that. And when they started introducing the characters in The Marvelous Land of Oz, I started going, like feeling that creepiness from the 80s, right? And there is, of course, a character named Tip in The Marvelous Land of Oz who is raised by a witch. He recreates a pumpkin that he puts powder all over and it turns into a person. And that pumpkin is loosely, obviously, based on jack-o'-lanterns, which is related to Halloween. And so there's that. You got witches and Halloween pumpkins. And we don't celebrate Halloween in our household. So that for me is a big number 2. Why I would not suggest, especially if you are a Christian and you don't celebrate Halloween. I feel like that book is like, you know, that book is... There's so much more to the second book, The Marvelous Land of Oz, than just the pumpkin and the boy. In the beginning of, this is so spoiler, okay guys? In the beginning of this book, it's all about this boy, and he's so boy, you know? He's got the sawhorse that he turns into, you know, real sawhorse with the powder from the witch, and then the jack-o'-lantern. Then he gets like in a fight with a bunch of girls that, actually that's really interesting because there's a bunch of girls that decide to take over the Emerald City because they think the girls should now be in charge, which obviously politically and, you know, with the allegories, this is obviously representing a feminist movement during that time. But the girls take over the castle where the Scarecrow is residing, and they're like, the men are kind of wimpy about it, and the women come in there with their knitting needles and like poke them to death. not to death, because they don't die, nobody dies. They just get like poked a lot with knitting needles. It's really, really silly, okay? And so it kind of reminded me of this boys versus girls, as in like a childhood playground. I kept seeing it that way. Eventually I was like, okay, I can handle this. It feels like girls versus boys in a childhood playground. And of course, the story goes on. Once again, this is a lot of spoilers, guys. I'm telling you it's a spoiler. But this is where it threw me off again, because at the end of the story, they're trying to figure out who the Emerald City actually belongs to, because the Wizard of Oz is gone on his hot air balloon, right? And then we've got Scarecrow dethroned by all the girls with the knitting needles, and then the knitting needle girls, like, it doesn't belong to them either. And the witches are all fighting with each other, like, who does it belong to? Finding out that the Wizard of Oz had a no, not the Wizard of Oz, the guy before the Wizard of Oz. This is so confusing. Either way, he had a son and he was hiding his son. Turns out that the boy that was so boy is actually a girl. Like, what? For real? Like, there is no, like, I can't even find the word to explain. There's a whole scene in the book where he talks about how he really likes being a boy and he doesn't want to be a girl, but he's actually a girl. And there's a whole dialogue there. And I know it's magic and I know it's pretend, but it didn't sit right with me. So that would be, I don't know, that's like 3 or 4. I'm somewhere around 3 or 4. 4 is actually the whole thing with witchcraft from a Christian perspective, you know, good and bad witches. Like, you know what, I feel like I need to leave a link to a really good teaching by Andrew Pudewa, where he talks about a story and how a story needs to define who is the villain. And anyway, it's really good, and how witches have always been known as being evil, like through history of fairy tales. Like, that's just been a thing, okay? And to make a witch now good kind of changes things up a little bit. And that's a whole different topic I'm not going to get into, but that is a reason why some people will not want to touch the Wizard of Oz. So now I want to get into like my 5th one. I think this is like the most important, okay? Because understanding who Frank L. Baum is helps you understand why all of this is going on in the book, okay? So Frank L. Baum, I did some research on him. It's sort of interesting. It is very interesting. It's very interesting, actually. So Frank L. Baum was born Methodist. And as he grew up, he really loved theater. That was one of his things that he really enjoyed. And he became Episcopalian specifically to be involved with theater. And then eventually his wife decided to influence him to join the Theosophical Society. Now, the Theosophical Society, I'm not going to put it up on the screen. You can go look up their symbol if you want to, but it incorporates literally every religion you can think of, even a swastika at the top of it, okay? It is a combination of Buddhism, Islam, occult, and even some Hindu in there. A lot of Asian religions, so they're really big into karma. Like, everything affects everything. That God is reached through mystical experience. It's an occult, basically. It's a society. It's an occult. It is what it is. Okay, that's what he was involved with. And you can actually, when you're reading the Wizard of Oz, understanding that that is his religion and his background, you can see it through the book. So for example, at the very end of the book, when Dorothy is about to leave to go back to her home in Kansas, which, by the way, just so you know, if you didn't know this already, Oz is an actual place in America. It's secluded. It seems to be like somewhere in the Midwest, because you can actually, and they do in the Marvelous Land of Oz, they actually travel into the places outside of Oz, and they just kind of turn around and get back into Oz. So it's a real place. It's a real magical land in the Midwest somewhere, like somewhere over there. It's not over the rainbow, guys. At the very end of the story, Glinda is there. And she tells Dorothy that she could have gone home all along because she had, and they're silver, not red, silver shoes, by clicking them, you know, and saying that she wants to go home. And she goes, well, I could have done this all along. And then the Scarecrow and the Tin Man and the Cowardly Lion announce, well, if we never met you, we would have never been or gotten a brain, and they actually all become rulers of a different area. So I know the Scarecrow, if you don't know, became the wizard, put him in charge of the Emerald City. And then the Tin Woodsman is in charge of, I think it's called the Winkies. The Winkies that were the Wicked Witches people that were servants. And then the Cowardly Lion is also in charge of another area in a forest area, because he wasn't so cowardly, he helped them out, and it's a whole thing. Either way, the point is they're all leaders of different areas. And if it wasn't for Dorothy's presence in the Wizard of Oz, in the Land of Oz, that wouldn't have happened. So it's that idea of everything affects everything else. And so she affected their lives just by her presence being there. And so there's a little bit of influence in there. Now, another thing I saw, which I don't think that Frank L. Baum wanted to, this was not his intent, but a lot of those that are atheists like to use the Wizard of Oz to explain why God isn't real. So they actually use it as an analogy, saying, you know, the wizard represents God and he is a fraud. There's that idea too, that it was a big lie and a big show, and you find your truth within yourself. That is also an idea that the atheists like to push. But what's interesting is there is that element in the story because they're finding power within themselves. It's a theme that seems to run. It wasn't the wizard who gave them brains. The Scarecrow had it all along. He had to just believe in himself, right? And same with the lion. He thought he was cowardly, but then he realized by drinking some kind of potion he became brave. But he was brave all along, right? You see that a little bit in the movie itself, but it's more apparent in the actual book. There are Christians that also use the Wizard of Oz as an analogy too, and other religions will use the Wizard of Oz as an analogy, which also proves my point with his little society that he was a part of, that it's a whole collection of all different religious thoughts. So that really helped me understand why the Land of Oz was so incredibly like all over the place. Whatever makes you happy in the Wizard of Oz, really. Now, there is some political allegory, which I think is really cool. That's like the only cool thing of the book. And I love it when books actually share with you the political climate of the time period, because I think we can learn a lot from that. So this was actually a reference to the populist movement that was happening or started in the 1890s. And this was an appeal to the ordinary people that felt like the elite weren't listening to their problems or things that concerned them. So each and every one of the characters in The Wizard of Oz actually represents a different group of people. Now, Dorothy is going to represent the typical American person. And then you've got the Scarecrow that is going to represent the farmers. The Tinsman actually represents the industrial workers. The Wicked Witch represents the industrialist. And the Lion actually represents the populist president at that time, which I guess, I don't know, he was a coward, I don't know, but he was really brave. I don't really know much about it, and it'd actually be fun to do some research on that. And then there is this idea of money, okay? You've got the yellow brick road, which represented gold during that time. Dorothy's silver slippers, which represented silver. There was a demonetization of silver during that time to replace it with paper money. And there was a concern that the paper money really didn't have any value. So when you get to the Emerald City in The Wizard of Oz, the Emerald City looks beautiful on the outside, and they strap these glasses on them, right? They don't talk about it in the movie. They do in Wicked. I do believe they put some reference to Wicked. But they slap these glasses on them, and they can't pull them off because they tie them with a lock in the back of their head. And when they go into the Emerald City, everything is covered by the green emerald glasses. So they think everything's green. It's fake. It's not really green. It's fake. So it's that whole idea. And the word Oz is actually represented for ounces. Besides the political stuff, which is actually pretty cool, everything else with the book, no. I was not a fan of the book. I don't like it. You know, I would apologize to my mother for not liking the book. It would be an interesting discussion that we would have if she was still around. But, you know, I just don't like it. I'll just leave it at that. I don't like it. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. And, you know, Let me know what you think about Wicked too. You know, is that something that you took your child to see? Is that something that you would take your child to see? Let me know. And are you sick of Defying Gravity? Are you sick of that song yet? I taught middle school when Wicked came out on Broadway, and I have middle schoolers now. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.